This is IBM Museum, and in this video we're going to do a little bit of PS2 troubleshooting. Behind me is the PS2 Model 80 Type 2 planar that I got from an eBay seller. He's a friend. He packaged it up with another item that I purchased from him. We made an agreement for that I was going to go through and test the planar because he had previously sold it and the buyer had returned it to him as the diskette drive not working. And of course, we'll go through and the steps of what we're going to do to troubleshoot that or to verify that the planar's working. I'm going to go through and I'll point out the items behind me here on the bench as I also go through and fire up my tweener system here, because I want to go over, and I have that up. We'll just let that come up on the monitor. I'll have to go through and select the OS that will boot from at the appropriate point here, but I want to kind of show the layout. We have the planar on a piece of cardboard just to insulate it off the bench. We're going through, of course, we do have the power supply on its side. This is a Model 80 power supply that I have as a spare for occasions like this. And I've got two memory boards. These are 2 megabyte apiece. This is the normal memory for this model to run it. It's probably in excess of having 2 in there when we could be one module would do just fine running the 2 megabyte. And of course we have a speaker pillar here that normally is in the Model 80 case. I'm going to go through and select to boot from MS-DOS for my tweener system that's off over here to the side. And you know, with the battery within that, a good battery, so we can save away a config once it goes to the point of testing the unit out. I'm going to start the process back here as I go a little bit further. We're going to put a diskette, a fresh diskette in the drive. And I'll go through, I'm going to change over to my ref disk directory. And I did, of course, already have this image downloaded to my machine. I've got the MS-DOS boot area over on the C drive. And I just basically, I download those images under the XP side of being able to get on the internet, switch them over to that directory. And then within this directory, I know that there's the RF 8090A.exe file. And we'll just have this run through this process. Of course, it gives the initial license agreement and everything else of how it was created, how we're going to go through and create the diskette image. We'll start to see some colors as we go through that ref disk process creation, and press enter to continue, just scrolling down through all this license agreement that IBM has set up for these creating these images. The big long beeps, and then if you agree, press Y or type Y and press enter. So we're going to do Y. We do have a diskette in the drive. It does warn us, so insert a blank high density diskette in drive A, press enter to extract or escape to exit. Okay, I'll get that process started so it'll run around as we kind of go a little bit further. I do have a known good diskette drive, and this is from my maxed out Model 30. Now this is a 40 pin edge connector drive. This is the connector style that the Model 80 initially came out with. It had a drive cage for the diskette drives, the A and if you had a B drive, and it had a spring-loaded assembly in there. You slid this back in there when you had the bezel off the front of the unit. And later on, IBM went through and they removed that process for the spring-loaded latching, and they have a ribbon cable that goes through and converts this to a 34-pin connect diskette drive for the diskette drives that other PS2s also used. And I'll eventually go through to do a... Okay, we got a diskette error. I will go through. Let's do another diskette. My bag of diskettes here. And these Emation diskettes are typically pretty good. But let's go through, and I do have a backup plan if we've... I was just wanting to show the ref disk creation process. And thankfully it won't take us through the screens anymore. We'll have to go through and check on that diskette later on. Who knows, we may have to go through and just to reinforce the format or something else. So, you know, at a later point I'll go through and I can show the 34-pin connector, and I need to actually make more of those ribbon cables. Just ordered some parts, make up some cables, because those can be helpful. But I just wanted to fall back kind of the old standard of how the Model 80, the diskette drives that it had, since we're focusing on that diskette drive controller for this. Now I do have where I can capture video from the Planar once we go through and fire it up, just to kind of get some results. And of course, what do we do in any diagnostic of PS2s? We have had it reported that this Planar does run. It was just, supposedly it was a problem with the diskette drive. But we put on those parallel port postcode readers on the back. And I have that plugged into the mouse port, since we won't be using the mouse for any of this process, going through and running seeing if we can get the reference diskette to boot on this system. We don't need it doesn't recognize having a mouse, and all that does is it's getting the power tap off the mouse port. So that diskette, the second diskette, completed successfully. Thank you. And we will go through. We're going to eject the diskette. We're going to go through and we will put it into the diskette drive. I want to go through and I can switch over to the display. I'll find out how I have to move it around on the screen. But let's go ahead and let's power this up. We do want to see, of course, that postcode. We're looking for the kind of the numbers changing over. I realize it's hard to see on camera, but you can see way there in the back. I mean, I could go through and zoom in my camcorder, but you can see those numbers turn over, and I'm seeing, you know, a good reaction as it goes through and actually counts the okay. And it counted to the 4 megabyte of memory, the 2 megabyte on each module, as we'd expect. I do have the diskette already in the drive, and so the system is smart enough to say, hey, it looks like this is a reference diskette. Everything matches up, so let's try and go ahead and boot from it. And just to be aware, these drives, they can go through and churn and everything else. It doesn't, they can be kind of quiet. The activity LED is on, but you don't think that anything's happening. It takes a little bit of time, but it'll kick over to that screen. And we've got, a good reference diskette in there, the version 1.12, which is the last version for the PS2 Model 70 and Model 80. The kind of the twinned systems of the desktop Model 70 and the tower Model 80. Those systems were matched up, beginning with the 380, having a 386DX CPU and having kind of matching the levels as they went through on those. So it does boot the reference diskette perfectly fine, and it gives us about the warning. We're going to go through and again, from the screen, I've covered the reference diskettes before. Really, when you see this yellow screen talking about press enter, it's going to try and restore the configuration. Just go with escape. Just go with cancel. Have it go through and to run the automatic configuration. It's giving us, of course, the battery error. Page 1 of 2. This is the second page. It's going to tell us, after this warning, we're going to press enter. It's going to run the automatic configuration. Now, we're still going to go through. It's running the configuration. We don't have any adapters in there. The adapters that we want to play with and get the adapter IDs, that's going to be another video. I want to do work before play here. Let's verify that the system, this planar, works. It's able to boot from a diskette, even though we're going to work from ROM basic for the adapters here. We don't have to worry about having a functional diskette drive or anything else like that. Now it's saying the automatic configuration is complete. And we saw our diskette creation process was really good. We don't necessarily need to go through and create a second reference diskette. So I just go ahead and press enter. I realize with the view here and the ring light on it, you can't see that that's still, my tweener system's still running on that center monitor. So it goes through, it counts to the 4 megabyte of those 2 modules, and accesses the diskette drive. Now, normally here we should have got the time and date error because it went through the automatic configuration, but that does not include going through and setting the time and date. And that's not necessarily, a critical aspect for ensuring that the computer runs, but, heck, let's go through and let's plug in. Oh, it's, and it's already November here, if I'd pay attention. And we're putting in that 2021 date. And we use a little bit of our military time. It doesn't really matter for the time that we're saying here. I'm saying the local time. And pressing enter. So we're going to go through. We'll step back. We have the ability, we could go through and test the computer and test revision levels. I don't know, the testing computer, that may be something that we kind of want to look at, because it has an aspect of it tells you insert a blank scratch diskette, blah, blah, blah. And that might be worthwhile even with that diskette that we have over there. But it's able to boot from the reference diskette, which is, that's the aspect that we were concerned with, of verifying that a diskette drive. And that's a very simple error that buyer could have encountered, because these diskette drives can go bad, that cabling. Now, Later on there was the reply planers. I've shown those, the turbo board and the power board, and they actually have a diskette drive cable if you use those, and those are stranded out for some of the connections, and they kind of reroute things. If you use that with a on the Model 80 in particular, I've seen this. It actually goes through and it will not even prevent the it'll prevent the power supply from powering up the planer, so you don't have any video. It acts like your power supply is dead, and you think, oh man, I blew a power supply or something else. Check that diskette connection. You can go through and pull that connection out of the planer, powered up, make sure you got video, make sure that everything else works. You'll see with of course the postcode reader that your codes are changing as well, before you kind of look at that aspect for the diskette drive cabling. And of course power is put over those. I wouldn't think it'd be as where they have like a cable for the 34 pin drives, and they think, well, I'll connect it up to a clone 1.44 megabyte diskette drive, and of course it doesn't work that way. Not realizing that those drives have a separate power connection. But I don't ask questions about people anymore. I mean, people do some strange things that they may have just been unfamiliar. And I'll give a link to the Model 80 Type 2 planer, just like we did in that previous video when I received and unboxed it, just showing the layout of what this planer is and everything. So we've seen the revision levels. I mean, it's clearly booting from diskette. We could go through. There's option for copying an option diskette and things like that we could test the diskette drive further. We could now go through and we could have a boot diskette. We don't have a hard drive configured on this. We could go through and try and boot from an operating system or something like that. But we're pretty confident now that it's able to work with a diskette, having a good drive, good reference diskette. This planer works, and that's what I'm going to report back to the eBay seller is, hey, your planer works. I'll go through, and I do have other Model 80 planers and things like that. This is a nice little planer to go through and get those adapter IDs. But before I send it back, we're going to go through and we'll use it for these adapter IDs, just have a little bit of fun, and I'll get it sent back to him so he can go through and re-offer that up again. He can even mark that eBay listing as, hey, this as appears or as shown on TV, or this is the planer that was on the YouTube video made famous. So the list actually looks real good here. So we'll do a Y. And this process normally does take a little bit of time. As I say, it'll probably get to the point with the diskette drive, and it'll probably want the scratch diskette, but we'll just kind of see. We just want to make sure. I mean, as I went through and unboxed it, I did say, and it wasn't a real good view. I didn't have the webcam arranged real good. Pretty well in that upper right hand corner for this video, but this planer does have bodge wires and things like that on it, which is a completely normal thing that IBM did. After these releasing some of these planers, they figured out that, hey, it didn't have some of the wiring. I might even get to the point, I know the seller takes pictures, very good pictures of his planers. I might go through just to kind of get an indication of these bodge wires and things like that for comparison to my other Type 2 Model 80 planers and see what this bodge wire level is, and if it looks like an earlier planer maybe than what I have and things like that, just for that reference that I can save that image away. So we'll just follow through. We'll just have a little bit longer video. We'll just let it go through and run these tests for a little bit more of a guarantee that the planer, as it's set up here, benched, does appear to be working fully. We don't have any hard drive controller plugged in there, but that's fine as well. You know, if you have an error from that, it's more likely to be the hard drive controller or the hard drive itself, rather than something with the planar, if it goes through and completes these tests for us. I'm just wanting to see kind of what it goes through. I had my suspicions that this would probably just be a something where the buyer was going through and not just saying it up correctly or something else. I'm happy to go through from experience on video showing, you know, how these things can be tested. I didn't go through. I didn't start any timer or anything like that when we entered this process to see that up to 5 minutes. And this is an early test. This is probably CPU and RAM and things like that going through, trying to resolve that. We're going to hope that this doesn't get stuck. It's going to be able to complete. If I run out of things to talk about, I can go through and I can pause the video and kind of catch up once it gets a little bit further here with these tests. But we're seeing, you know, good reaction otherwise. From this planar, that it does seem to work. Okay. Now I'm going to go through and I'll video as it goes through, and once it has something that comes up, I'll go through and I can unpause it and continue. Okay, and it's continued. It went through the memory test real quick. It's prompting us about our keyboard. I have a standard Model M here that's got the shape of the inner key that's shown for depressing F1. We can go through and this is probably more testing the keyboard and the lights and everything, and it even has the indicators for the things like the scroll lock. Going through and turning that off. As I go through, sometimes a quicker way might be to something like that. And this does match the, there it did the caps lock, the num lock, and it so that's a little bit quicker way, and they've got all the symbols there. We've got everything, every key pressed, and if the keys are okay, press F1 then enter, and then I don't know what the process does for the F2 and then press enter if it's wrong. So I'll press F1 then enter. Complete testing. Parallel port test. And as I say, once it gets up to the diskette drive, I'm actually expecting it to prompt, that please insert a scratch high density diskette in drive A. And I can say, you know, we want to talk scratch diskette. We can do that. Failed reference diskette. Should be good enough for a scratch diskette test. Speed test. And these are the drives, and this is actually a Sony branded diskette drive that they did for IBM. These were the diskette drives that did come with the Model 80s when they first came out, before IBM kind of changed it up a little bit later on. We'll see with how it does on the formatting for this diskette, since it did even fail on that to create the reference diskette on it. Usually I found out with at least with the Amation diskettes I have, they're good enough quality. It just may have been in the years that they've been stored, that format on the diskette needs to be refreshed. And please reinsert your reference diskette into drive A. I'm kind of a little bit bad here where I don't have these diskettes labeled in some way. Okay, diskette drive A could not be verified. May be caused by defective diskette. I mean, we need to remember that. And, you know, the reality I'm going to go with here is that that it did go through. It's able to boot through to the reference diskette. I'm going to go through and I'm going to believe that is a faulty diskette. You know, at a later point I could go through and a verified good diskette. I could go through and check that process a little bit more with a diskette, just to you know, diminish what that or diagnose a little bit more of what the is causing that, whether it's a bad diskette or does your display have a problem? No, I didn't see the initial question it asked. I just thought it said, "Hey, press Y if the screen's good." So is a mouse attached to the computer? And in this instance, we're powering that postcode reader from the mouse port. So we'd actually select no. It's going to go through and not test that mouse port any further. Just looking for that serial communication stream from the mouse. Okay, if the default disk is drive A, please remove the diskette. And drive A computer hardware tests have been completed. Testing found no errors, and you're still having problems with the computer. See what if testing cannot find the problem in your quick reference. Okay. And if you want to start your operating system, and we don't have an operating system diskette out here, so that's fine. We don't have a fixed disk connected. We are just going to go through and press the enter key to go through and to boot once again from the reference diskette. It's just another way of verifying, another reboot. And probably for the grand scheme of things, to make sure that there's not any issues, I mean, doing that multiple times, making sure that there's no further errors that crop up. Okay. And once the system is configured with that reference diskette, it goes through everything being set. It goes through and loads from diskette a lot quicker. Just that initial time, you know, don't be overly concerned. You see that diskette access light going and you think, what is the system doing? Just give it a little bit of wait, you know, to get up to this point. So I think we verified that this diskette drive connected to this planar does work. We're able to boot from it. And that's going to be my diagnosis back to the seller to say, we're looking at a good planar. It looks like it fully works. And they can go through and watch the video for themselves. So if you did enjoy the content of this video, seeing us go through and do our troubleshooting process and creating the reference diskette, click on that like button. Let me know. Leave a comment. You know, if you'd like to fill in some information or if you have any questions, I will go through and put the appropriate links in the video description. And as always, if you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. Recommend this to others so we can get more subscribers on my channel. But that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.